How Eamon Met Kaidan, Chapter 2. Somewhere in Eastmarch, Emelia. Morndas, 20th of Evening Star, in the 201st year of the Fourth Era. 4 days earlier. She'd been knocked unconscious. She never heard footsteps behind her. Her attacker never said a word or made a sound. She never felt the blow. 1 minute, she was searching a drawer for the papers she wanted, and the next she was waking up in a dark cell. She was all but naked, and the room was empty save for the straw mattress she was lying on, and an empty nightstand beside her with a lamp that had no candle. Her head throbbed with a pain unlike any headache she'd ever known, and she felt a pressing need to vomit. She could see very little with clarity, just blobs of shape in the darkness. She felt around for a chamber pot or privy bucket, anything she could use. Finding nothing, she improvised and pulled a drawer from the nightstand, just in time to fill it with the contents of her stomach. In the empty stone room, the sounds of her retching rang out impossibly loud. When it was over, afraid of having called attention to herself, she sat still and quiet, trying to adjust to the lack of light and listen for any sign she wasn't truly alone. As she sat there, she had time to consider some things. She had been fully dressed before, and now she wore nothing but a loose linen tunic. Someone had stripped her completely naked and put this foreign garment over her body while she was unconscious. Having noted that violation, she began to consider what else could have befallen her, but pushed those questions aside. She couldn't look at such a possibility right now. She had more than enough to deal with as it was. She stood slowly, testing the strength of her legs. Her head swam a little, but her balance seemed intact. When she was confident she would not begin retching again, she picked up the foul drawer that had become her privy pot and moved it to the opposite corner of her cell. The cell itself, though empty and stark, was rather large, and with the privy drawer removed from her sleeping corner, the smell dissipated, and her eyes were adjusting to the darkness. She sat down on her mattress and strained her ears for any hint of sound, but all she heard was dripping water and the ringing of silence. Some time later, she drifted back into sleep. When she awoke the second time, she was no longer alone. There were 3 of them. They were Altmer. They held her arms down and spat on her face. One laughed, and his breath smelled like fish. One pulled at her tunic. "No! Stop!" One said the name Andarian. "Pain! No! Stop!" She could not move, and they were everywhere. She would not think of them, or what they were doing. "Best not to dwell on what we cannot change, Emelia." Eamon. She wanted Eamon. Eamon would make her a cup of lavender tea, and they would sit together by the fire. "Read to me, Eamon," she would say. "History or adventure, Ruma?" Eamon would ask. "Read me the one about the Imperial who was sent to Blackmarsh," she would say. "Stop it! I can't breathe! No!" "You always did like that one best," he would say. He would pull the green volume from the shelf near the fireplace and then lie down on the rug next to her with his head in her lap. She had always wanted him to do that. She could hear his voice now, and she sipped her tea. "The stench of fish and cheap wine and sweat." The tea smelled like lemon and lavender petals. It was warm, and it soothed her dry throat. She ran her fingers through Eamon's hair where it fell on her knee. She had always wanted to do that. It shimmered silver and bronze in the firelight, just like she knew it would. She listened to the sound of his laughter when he reached up to touch her nose, saying, "Ruma, are you even listening? This is the best part." "Yes, Eamon, I'm listening," she said. And she looked into the metallic gray pools of his beautiful eyes and saw safety there. Yes, she would stay with Eamon until morning. Nothing else was real. The third time she woke up in her cell, there was a candle in her lamp. One of them must have left it. Emelia spoke the words of fire, and the candle bloomed into light. It was dim, but she could see everything now. A table had been added to her cell, and there was a chamber pot in the corner of the room, a proper porcelain chamber pot with flowers painted on the surface. The perversity of those flowers prod her to anger. She would have smashed it against the stone floor, but she had a far more pressing need, and she decided she'd rather use the pot than break it. Her nightstand had no more drawers to use, and the one she'd already sullied had been removed. "Oh, good, you're awake," said a deceptively pleasing voice, startling her as she rose from relieving herself. She looked to the door, where a tall, beautiful, and rather androgynous Altmer male stood staring intently at her through the iron bars. Was he watching me? "My name is Cerulean. I'm the justiciar assigned to this prison, and I've come to apologize, Lady Emelia. The unpleasantness visited upon you in this chamber was unbefitting of any who represent the Thalmor. Such behavior is strictly forbidden here, and you may take comfort in knowing that those responsible have been punished." Not knowing how else to respond, Emelia simply said, "Thank you." Cerulean sniffed as if she had not spoken, and continued, "Our Chief Justiciar is traveling down from his post to speak to you." He said this as though she should consider it a great honor. "Normally, you would have been summarily executed for breaking and entering on Thalmor grounds, but apparently there are those in leadership who believe you have information of value. When the chief arrives, it will behoove you to cooperate fully. Perhaps, if you do, he will show you mercy. In the meantime, we must address the situation we now find ourselves in concerning your person. I'm going to open your cell door now, so do please sit upon the bed and place your hands where I can see them." Fear became bile in her throat, but Emelia did as he bid, and Cerulean unlocked the door. He signaled for someone in the corridor to come in, and 2 Altmer guards in full battle armor carried in a heavy copper washtub. She watched, transfixed, as the 2 elves left and returned 4 times with buckets of clear water to fill the tub. They also brought in a drying cloth, a bar of soap, and another tunic like the one Emelia was already wearing, which they laid out upon the table as though they were reverently presenting offerings in a temple. When the guards were finished and filed out of the room, Emelia asked, "Where are my clothes?" Cerulean ignored her question and gestured to the tub with his perfectly manicured hand. "Bathe," he said. Stunned, Emelia sat frozen to the spot. Does he mean to stay and watch? After a few interminable seconds of silence, it became clear that was precisely what he meant to do. "Sir, you said no more unpleasantness would be allowed." Cerulean's eyes widened, and he flinched as if she had slapped him. "I have no interest in your naked body, girl. Now do as I say and bathe." She tried to obey him, but the thought of being exposed again was too overwhelming. Her legs were frozen, and she could not make them move. At her continued failure to comply, Cerulean became agitated and crossed the room as though he would drag her to the tub. Emelia let out a distressed cry and retreated further into the corner, but Cerulean stopped short and carefully recollected his composure. "He won't touch me. He thinks it would befoul him if he touched me." Cerulean's nostrils flared in disgust, and Emelia was pretty sure she'd guessed his motivations correctly. The elf pulled a small glass vial from a pocket hidden somewhere in his robes and placed it very deliberately next to the lamp on the nightstand. "You will drink this," he said. Emelia knew what was in the bottle, and though a part of her lit up with fury at the cold cruelty of such a demand, another part of her praised Stendar for the merciful peace of mind that bottle would give her. She took it, removed the stopper, and drank every drop. She had hoped this display of compliant behavior might placate Cerelian, but he was not so easily misdirected. He continued to tower over her and repeated his command to go and bathe in front of him, but she couldn't do it. And when her head began to shake back and forth in involuntary defiance of the idea, Cerelian got truly angry. "Get up, you Breton bitch," he hissed, "and wash the divine seed from your unworthy body, or I will invite the guards who spilled it there to do it for you." Emelia recoiled, but no sooner had the words left his mouth than a piercing scream, followed by a chorus of shouts, rang out from somewhere down the corridor beyond her cell. The voices were all male, and they were all speaking Altmeris, so she didn't catch any of their meaning, but she could hear the fear. The elves outside were afraid of something. Emelia's Thalmor tormentor swiftly exited her cell, presumably to join in the fracas. Taking advantage of the moment, Emelia ran to the tub and nearly croaked out a sob upon discovering the water was clean, cold, and clear. She hadn't had a drink since she'd been brought in here, and her throat nearly spasmed at just the thought of being quenched. She drank and drank until she couldn't hold any more. "I'm so sorry, Eamon. I'll never do it again. Please come find me." No longer thirsty, and no longer under the lascivious glare of a sinister guard, she realized how pleasant it would be to wash the guards from her body, to feel clean again. She blocked out the sounds outside and climbed into the tub to bathe. The water was frigid, but it helped her pull her thoughts into the present. She had to stay clear-headed if she was going to come out of this hole. Think, Emelia, think. A part of her desperately clung to the hope that if she washed herself thoroughly and put on the clean tunic, she would spare herself at least the humiliation of being forced to do it in front of her captors. She set to the task of scrubbing her thighs to remove the blood and the dirt But she wouldn't think about that. "It isn't real, Emelia. Eamon is real. This is not real. The guards were not real. The shouts are not real. This prison is not real. Eamon is real. You have to get home to Eamon." She scrubbed herself until her skin was raw with irritation, and then she soaped up the cloth to scrub some more. She only stopped when another howling scream of pain rent the air, and then a voice speaking the common tongue rang out with a growl that grew into a booming war cry, followed by a string of mocking insults and curses. "You Thalmor pigs are all the same," he shouted. "Weak arms and tiny—" A sickening thud cut off the voice, and the scuffle of many feet followed. Thankful to whoever that brave, foolhardy man might be, Emelia finished her ablutions and quickly covered herself with the clean tunic. No one returned to her cell. The fourth and final time that Emelia woke up in the prison, she sat up with an alert clarity of mind that was almost uncanny. She reached out with her magic to feel for the presence of other people. Frustrated, she felt only one. That couldn't possibly be correct. The prison had been full of people just hours before. No one had come to question her. The Thalmor guards had not returned to further abuse her. Cerelian had not come back to humiliate her, and everything was quiet. She reached out one last time, casting her magic through the space, projecting outward until she felt the spell pull back. She could reach no further. There was only one person nearby, and that lone person was dying. She could feel it in the weakness of the spark. Had something happened while she was asleep? Was she locked in this cell alone and left to die? Stop panicking, Emelia. Get up. She took 2 deep breaths and walked as silently as she could to the door in her cell. Gripping the bars to look in either direction, she felt the door give way. Tentatively, she pushed against the bars. It made a bit of a creaking sound, and the echoes of it rang through the corridor. Nothing happened. No one came. She heard no footsteps. She heard no voices. And the door was wide open. He forgot to lock it when the men started shouting, "Run!" No, she mustn't run. She didn't know why she hadn't heard any more voices, and she didn't know why she couldn't sense any guards nearby, but that didn't mean the place was empty, that she could just leave. Run! No. She was an educated, intelligent woman. She could control her fear. She was about to take her adept levels, for crying out loud. She would remain calm and think this through. Emelia opened her palm and spoke the words of fire. A weak flame flickered to life in her palm, but she wasn't gifted with fire and knew she couldn't carry it for long. She lifted her hand to illuminate the passage, memorizing the layout and praying for the best. She closed her fist over the flame, and darkness settled back over the corridor. Deciding her best course of action would be to get away from her cell and find a place to hide, she walked deliberately and slowly on the balls of her feet until the corridor opened into a massive central chamber. There were rows of barred cells on either side of her, but she could make out no movement coming from any of them. A soft groan from somewhere to the right made her startle nearly out of her skin. She clapped a hand over her mouth and swallowed the scream that was clawing its way up from her lungs. Breathe, Emelia. Slow down. Think. Crouching down as low as she could, Emelia snuck out of the center of the room and moved in the direction of the sound. This had to be that dying spark she'd sensed from her cell. If it was a guard, she could finish him off, and then at least she'd have some shoes. If it wasn't a guard, then maybe she could help that person, and 2 people make better odds than 1. As she approached the cell she thought the sound had come from, she saw the glow of a distant lamp. Silhouetted between her and the light source was a man, hanging from a set of cruel-looking metal plates bolted to the stone wall. An audible gasp escaped Emelia's lips, and the man jerked to consciousness. In a bleary but belligerent voice, he snarled, "When I get out of here, I'll kill you all myself." Oh, this would never do. He was going to alert someone and get them killed. "Be quiet," she hissed. "I'm here to help you. Don't speak." Ignoring her, but lowering his voice, the man whispered, "You're not with the Thalmor, are you?" "No," she replied. "My name is Emelia. I'm a prisoner like you. Hold on, and let me figure out how to get you down from there." She spoke the words of fire again and held the light aloft in her palm. She whimpered at the sight before her. He was a human man, and a large one, Nord maybe. It was hard to tell because every inch of his body was covered in dark patches of dried blood, and fresh rivulets were oozing out of huge gashes on his arms, stomach, legs, and chest. Emelia Ashcroft was not generally a weeping sort of woman, but tears began to pour freely at the sight of this powerful body they had ruined. "Sweet Mara," she whispered, "what have they done to you?" She immediately spoke the words of light and poured all of her magicka into a restorative flow. "Stay with me," she whispered, and placed her hands on his throat and his wrist to focus her magic with the rhythm of his heart. He jerked and stiffened at her touch, but she tightened her grip and stepped in closer, pressing her body flush with his. Revulsion, fear, and pity coalesced as his blood soaked through her tunic, and her cheek pressed into the frighteningly cold, rigid skin of his chest. She suppressed her urge to recoil from him, closed her eyes, and gave herself over to the magic. "Don't resist me," she whispered. "Let me in. Let me help you." His head relaxed and fell down to rest on hers, and she did not stop until her magicka flickered, and she realized she had completely exhausted herself. The man moaned out a protest, when she stumbled away from him and sank to the floor. "I'm so sorry, sir," she whispered. "But I've given you all I can for now. Let me rest a moment, and I'll be able to finish the job." The man drew in a deep breath, and Emelia saw that some color had returned to his face and torso, a good sign. "Kaidan," the man said. "My name is Kaidan." His voice still sounded weary, but it was clear, and he was lucid. "Thank you, Emelia." She looked up at his face, still hanging over her from the wall, and that was the first time she saw his shocking eyes. "Oh!" she cried, almost shouting, and then immediately covered her mouth as they both listened for any sign of approaching steps. "Forgive me," she said, keeping her volume low. "That was unforgivably stupid and rude." Kaidan let out a very low chuckle. "It wasn't rude, it was honest. I'm not a creature of the Daedra, lass. I'm just a man born with red eyes." "I'm still sorry for it. Can I help you down? Do you know where they keep the key to your restraints?" "Over there," he said, and gestured with a nod to a table on the far side of the room. Rising from the floor, she retrieved the wrought iron key and set to work releasing his wrists. When finally free of the manacles, Kaidan collapsed to his hands and knees with a soft grunt, and Emelia was horrified anew by the sight of his mutilated back. Had they done that to him with knives? A whip? A hot iron, maybe? She didn't know, but the brutality of it was shocking. "Oh, Kaidan, is there any part of you they did not damage?" She placed her hand on the side of his neck again and began to speak the words of light, but Kaidan covered her hand with his own and said gently, "You've done enough. Save your strength. We're going to need it."